Yesterday, I made a video evaluating the 4 instances where referee Herb Dean called for more action from Merab Dvalishvili in his UFC 306 title fight. And in that video, I basically argued that I found all 4 instances of Herb's intervention to be justified, some without any issue really at all. But relevant to today's video, I had also said that I had contacted Herb and other referees, and if they got back to me, I would let you guys know. Well, that happened. Herb called me yesterday. We spoke for about 30 minutes on a range of topics, including but not limited to those instances where he had called for more work from Merab. What I cannot do today is speak on behalf of Herb. Ultimately, his opinions and beliefs are his own, and they are his to tell whenever he elects to do so. What I can do is speak on behalf of my views. Know that any opinions expressed here in this video are my own and my own alone. So, let me leave you with 3 conclusions that I came to after feedback from all of you about yesterday's video, as well as insights that I gained from my conversation with Herb. Now, I don't have any hard data on this, but from what I can gather, most folks seem to agree the referee should play some kind of role in advancing action when a bout is stalled or has reached a stalemate, although not everyone, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Where many people do actually differ is what those situations should be where the referee is allowed to act. Is there an amount of time that has to elapse? Are there certain positions where nothing can be said? Are there others where a more hasty response from the referee is warranted? The truth is, right now, there just isn't much consensus about these questions. And that is why more conversation around this issue needs to happen from people of all perspectives. Consider this. Do you realize how long the debate over what constitutes a grounded fighter in MMA has been going on? The answer is 18 years. 18 years. And yet, we're still trying to get that right. Like many of the questions around what referees should or shouldn't do, it is not easy to figure out. And worse, it changes based on how the sport itself evolves over time. So having an ongoing conversation over when and how a referee should encourage fighters to work in stalled positions or situations is damn near mandatory if we want to get that right. So more of this from all parties, please. This point is the most important one in this whole video. There are folks who don't really want much intervention by the referee in these stalled or stalemate positions, if any at all. And honestly, I disagree with this view in every possible way, but it's a real perspective that many people who love MMA and even have been around it for a long time still believe. So it is by no means a fringe position. In their view, the referee should have no, or at least a highly limited role in addressing stalls or stalemates. Either the fighters themselves should work it out, or the judges will penalize the fighters for not doing enough. But in either case, these folks prefer referees playing basically no role in advancing the action. Now, no one is going to be convinced of anything overnight, but let me say I think that this worldview fails for 2 very good reasons. First, part of the reason the sport of amateur wrestling has such a reputation as a hard-nosed activity is because the referees there are tasked with making sure there is action used to advance the match at literally all times. For example, in folk-style wrestling, the referee can restart 2 wrestlers when they've reached a stalemate position. So think logically about what benefit this role for the referees confers. Without them serving in that specific role, the matches would not look at all like they do. They'd be completely different. And also, the sport itself becomes much different, especially over time. If there isn't a referee blowing his whistle because a wrestler took a step out of bounds, this would fundamentally alter the kind and amount of aggression you'd see overall in that sport. The referees in scholastic or sometimes freestyle wrestling don't merely enforce the rules, but they become enforcers of the kind of sport that people want wrestling to be. The kind of sport wrestling is supposed to be. And while I don't think MMA should have referees quite as hands-on as they do in scholastic wrestling, I fully believe empowering referees in MMA to have a similar kind of control yields very positive results. Consider this. Folk-style wrestling bans the use of locked hands in numerous cases, including something called referee's position. Do you know why locked hands are banned there? Because that grip is so powerful that if it was allowed basically there or essentially at all times in the match, it would make the wrestling we see today unrecognizable. There would be an avalanche of stalled positions and stalemated action. So, given that reality, it is very difficult for me to be able to understand why some in MMA have no problem with, for example, allowing locked hands, and yet also think stalling should go unaddressed by the referees. Do you not see what a recipe for disaster this would be? A sufficient amount of action cannot and does not happen by itself consistently over time. Athletes will eventually retreat to positions or situations where they don't have to engage if someone or something isn't making them. There has to be an enforcement mechanism. You take that away and you're flat out getting a different sport. Now, I know some might respond here that judges not awarding rounds or fights to fighters who stall or do stuff like this would actually deter them, but this seems totally wrong. Judges right now are being taught to not award that, and you still see fighters reach stalemates or stall out because they think they can get away with it. They always seem to think their version of stalling in their own fights or stalemating won't cost them with the particular judges that they have, but it could affect somebody else somewhere else. There's already a judging system that isn't supposed to reward inactivity or various forms of passivity, and yet we still see it all the time. Clearly, just relying on judges to penalize them is woefully insufficient as a deterring mechanism. Second, this is a spectator sport, folks. It's an entertainment business. It seems to me deeply, deeply foolish to think you can let stalemates or stalling go basically unaddressed and expect no long-term consequences to how viable this becomes as a profitable business. And I know what some folks are going to say here. Whenever I make this argument, people think what I'm saying is the referees need to be in charge of entertainment. That is not at all what I am saying. I am saying a sport where referees enforce action according to good guidelines has as a byproduct more entertainment as a result. We're not commanding referees to tell fighters what to do or to jazz everything up, just that they have to do more when there isn't enough. The downstream effect of this is to make a more palatable product to the masses. If you think allowing stalls and stalemates has no consequence for a sport where you're trying to sell tickets or you expect folks to buy on pay-per-view, you are in for a very rude awakening. Less, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely not always more. Folks, we have to learn there's a difference between being busy and actually working to advance the fight towards a finish or advancing it really at all. Now, one of the common responses to defending Herb's specific calls for more action from Merab at UFC 306 is that, hey, Merab is the last guy who needs to be told to work more. I mean, for example, look at his work rate, look at his energy, look at his pace. And the reality is, generally speaking, that's true. His work rate in the first 3 rounds was incredible. His work rate overall is off the freaking charts if we're statistically speaking. But that has nothing to do with whether Merab in those particular moments was actually working to advance the fight. Putting on an insane pace in the first part or first 3/5 of a fight doesn't absolve you from stalling in the latter part. For example, in round 5, when Merab has a control position, by the way, with locked hands, and is throwing knees to the leg of O'Malley, is he working to push the fight forward towards a finish, or is he just being busy? Okay, he's working there. About that we can all agree, but working to what end? Is there meaningful advancement happening here over the expanse of time? I would argue there's not. And like other situations, of course, This will be a matter of interpretation, but being in a dominant position and throwing shots that don't produce any change over an extended period of time is absolutely not the same thing as really trying to attack an opponent in a way that advances the fight. You can be busy and even in a control position and absolutely be stalling. I believe, in fact, this is one such case. And no matter what, we should all have a better appreciation for these differences, being busy versus working to advance the fight. Now, these are my views, and I don't expect them to be universally convincing. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's going to be far from that. But this is where having a conversation comes into play. So, what do you think is the appropriate role for a referee in stalemates or stalls in modern mixed martial arts? What do you think the sport should look like, given how we either do or don't empower referees? By the way, if you're looking for more information from Herb, either to contact him or learn more about his courses, you can go to herbdean.com. But for now, let the debate begin.